Welcome back. It's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review. And today, from McFarlane Toys in their DC Multiverse line, we are featuring Superman, celebrating 85 years, which is crazy. This features Superman as he appears in the much beloved Hush storyline, which was written by Jeff Loeb and illustrated by Jim Lee, inked by Scott Williams, colored by Alex Sinclair, and lettered by Richard Starkings of Comicraft. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of the Hush comic books from back in the day. I think for a lot of people, Hush is kind of like the definitive Batman story of their generation. You know, prior to that, books like The Dark Knight Returns, Batman the Killing Joke, they were such prominent Batman stories, but I think Hush struck a very specific chord with that generation, who read comic books in the late 90s, early 2000s. And to this day, whenever you throw the words Hush into anything Batman related, people always gobble it up. And such is the case here. We have the Hush version of Superman. I believe there's a gold label version of this action figure, and I think the differences are maybe the flesh tone. I think he has the irradiated eyes. He's about to shoot his eye beams, and I believe it also comes with the poison ivy vine that you can wrap around his arm, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is the stock version. I purchased this. I don't remember where, but it's out there. If you come across it, I'm sure you'll probably pick it up, because I think if you're like me, a lot of collectors, they're always on the search for the perfect, evergreen, iconic version of their favorite superheroes. Everyone wants that perfect Batman figure. Everyone wants that perfect Superman figure. And for me, this is very close. I just have a couple of gripes about it. But nonetheless, beautiful looking figure. As you can see here, it's a very stock and standard, tried and true design of Superman, and I think this is going to be very popular with collectors. He comes with his display base, which you can see in the back. It's a flight stand, and he comes with an extra pair of hands, so he can kind of recreate his flying poses. On the back, we have some black and white. It looks like this Jim Lee's pencil work, Xeroxed, and this is from the Hush book. And let's get this out and get on with our review of Superman. There we go. Alright, so we have the Man of Steel himself. And it's great. There's so many things about this figure that are done right, yet I have a couple of personal gripes about it, but that's just me being nitpicky. I'm sure for a lot of people this is probably their perfect version of Superman. We have the trading card, and then we have the flight stand. I'm kind of surprised they went with this image. I think if you've read Hush, it was a miniseries done in the monthly Batman comic books, and it seems like they could have pulled a much more iconic, better image of Superman done by Jim Lee. I was kind of surprised they went with the black and white Xerox pencil work. The figure itself, it looks fantastic. The one thing that you're not really seeing on the difference between seeing this on camera versus in real life is that on camera you don't see how dull or how kind of gray his flesh tone is. In person, his flesh tone is it's very pale, almost anemic. It's kind of like missing those rich hues that really bring the figure to life. In some ways, I kind of almost feel like maybe this flesh tone was supposed to be used with the Poison Ivy seduced version of the figure, where he's kind of hypnotized. And I love seeing this. I love it when they take the time and they give Superman the emblem on the back of the cape. I think it also depends on the accuracy of the version they're trying to portray, but many times, Superman action figures don't always have the S on the back. right, so here we go. Superman. All right, so what I like about the figure, this way it's not. All right, so I want to get the colors as true to life as possible. So I'm going to adjust my white balance on my camera by bringing out this white sheet of paper. And this kind of gives you a better idea of what I'm talking about. All right, so the flesh tone here, he looks very pale and anemic. You know, it's not a rich shade. Like, for example, that's maybe a bad example. Like, here's a Diamond Select Alfred figure. As you can see, his flesh has some pink hues to it. It feels like he's alive. You know, this is a very almost like zombie, dead, gray, almost kind of like pale flesh tone. And the figure is almost perfect. It's just that the skin tone is so dull and lifeless. There's some like highlights on the cheeks and the forehead, but for the most part, it's very like this grayed and drowned out. And I think that kind of holds the figure back from being perfect. One thing, now this is more so me just being subjective. You know, it's going to be based on personal preference. But I've said this in many videos before. I do like it on action figures when the capes are neutral and they kind of just flow downward. This one, it looks a lot more dynamic, you know, with it kind of flowing. But, you know, I don't always want my capes flowing around. If you're displaying this on a shelf, this also leaves a bigger footprint just because the capes might get in the way of another figure. But for the most part, it makes the figure look dynamic. It makes it look a little bit more exciting. But it's just a choice of personal preference. I prefer the neutral cape, but I do see the appeal of this because it does look nice. Another thing I do like about the figure is that the shade of blue, it's not that it's perfect, but it's the appropriate shade of blue for Superman. On some action figures, you know, it might come across a little bit too dark, others maybe too light. For me, this is just a nice balance. It works very well with the red and the yellow. You know, they capture that perfectly. Another thing I do like is that the build of the figure, you know, if you've ever read any of Jim Lee's Batman books or Superman or Justice League books, he has a very unique signature style about how he draws the male figure. You know, it's very like classically heroic proportions. They're very muscled out and bulky. And I kind of feel like this Superman really embodies, you know, that Jim Lee art style. Jim Lee's characters, you know, they're often kind of like barrel-chested, like heavy in the shoulders and big in the biceps. And this really captures that. This Superman has some huge shoulders. You know, this guy really looks like he could like lift a truck and throw it in the sky. It's a fantastic looking figure. I love how the Superman emblem's actually a detail that's not just painted on. It's actually a separate piece, so you can actually feel it when you run your hands over them. You know, it has some depth and dimension to it. The belt's done nicely. So everything about this figure, it's really, really spot on. I love how McFarlane's done a better job of covering up the ball joints, you know, where they attach at the wrist or the ankles. You know, if you've ever collected some of the older figures from like year one of the McFarlane stuff, you know, the wrists, they always looked very unsightly with the ball joint being very exposed. And, you know, like 3 years later, they've done such better jobs of just covering that up, yet still affording that you know, that posability. So those are the things I really, you know, like about the figure. You know, it's not perfect, but it's close enough. I kind of feel at this point that McFarlane's made so many Superman figures that if the perfect Superman figure isn't out there yet, chances are you might be able to kit bash one just by, you know, cherry picking different pieces from other Supermans and kind of Frankensteining them together. Like, if this isn't the perfect Superman head for you, chances are you could probably look back and maybe like grab another head that looks more appropriate for the look that you want. Maybe you want a Superman whose expression is a little bit more, you know, animated, and I'm sure there's been figures that might have that. But, you know, this is a nice figure. I think for some people, this might be the end-all Superman right now. But for me, it's close, but it's just off by a little bit. You know, I kind of feel like the flesh tone could be a little bit richer in the pinks and the reds. You know, this looks much like a muted, almost like Bizarro kind of flesh tone. I do like I do appreciate the look of the cape, but again, I do prefer the neutral cape. Articulation, you know, it's there. You know, the butterfly joints allow a little bit more mobility. He has the double pinned elbows. Let's see now. He could his diaphragm doesn't really want to crunch forward. He could arch back enough, so if you wanted to get him in a flying pose, let's see if you could do that. Yeah, if you wanted to get him in a flying pose, you could. You know, no issue there. The legs, it's met with some resistance when you kick upward, and when you kick upward, it kind of like twists to the side as well. McFarlane figures, they do have somewhat of a thigh swivel, but it's very limited. It's a very, I don't know, he doesn't have the posability of like a Flash action figure. You know, I'll leave it at that. But, you know, if you want a Superman that's just gonna like stand on top of the Daily Planet and pose at sunset, you know, this is the one for you. It looks really great. Numerically, if I had to give it a scale between 1 to 10, for me, my first thought was 8 to 8.5. It's not perfect, at least in my sense, but it's pretty darn close. You know, I think this is, oh man, there's so much about it I love. Like, the spit curl in the front looks perfect. But man, for me, I just kind of wish he had a somewhat different facial expression, or at least maybe a richer flesh tone, just to breathe some life into him, because he's very pale. You know, looks like he hasn't seen the sun in a long time. And if you know Superman, he needs the Earth's sun to like power him up. So, all right, so I'm rambling here, but it's a great action figure. You know, if you see this in the wild, pick it up. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. All right, later.